I'm the director of an insane asylum located in the woods of Western Canada. This area has a lower population now than it did 100 years ago. Likewise, I'm the only inmate at this asylum, of which I am the chief employee. A bookkeeping error has allowed me to keep getting paid for almost 30 years now. I'm not about to blow the whistle on this sweet deal. For the first decade or so, I kept the lights on and the doors open in case someone came by seeking treatment. No one ever came. The doors did on occasion blow open, and the cost of heating the place during the coldest months became prohibitive, so I shut most of it down. On the front door, there's a notice asking anyone seeking mental health treatment to call my phone number. My phone has not rung for over 20 years. I've come up with no good reason to call anyone, so for all I know, the phone is no longer in service. Maybe squirrels ate the wire. Maybe an ice storm took down the telephone lines. You may wonder how I sustain myself here in the middle of nowhere. I'm still eating the canned rations that I found on the day I first arrived. As far as I can tell, I would have to live to be 300 before I consumed all the canned beans, beets, tuna, peas, and soups. During the warm weather months, I eat vegetables from my garden, and apples, cherries, pears, and apricots from our orchard. The fruits are not doing well. Someday soon I expect the last fruit tree will die. They don't live forever, you know. I have saved seeds from those fruits and will start planting new trees next year, if I live that long. I'm almost 70. There appears to be nothing wrong with me, but I know from this point on, it's not unheard of for people to simply die. Sometimes there's a warning, other times not much. Years ago, one of my healthiest friends died from pancreatic cancer when he was in his prime. 3 weeks passed from diagnosis to death. Well, I've never been extraordinarily fit or healthy. Simply puttering about the grounds gives me a modicum of exercise. When I pass, no one will notice. If I have some warning, I think I'll try to go outside so my body can be consumed by animals, insects, and birds. I'd hate to leave a mess inside. Although it's hard to imagine now, I used to be quite a party animal. In graduate school, I was the clown who tried to get everyone drunk on a punch laced with pure alcohol. I'd steal the alcohol from the lab, and a liter was enough to bring a large group to its knees. I thought I needed a lot of friends, and they needed me. Now I realize that was simply a convenient fiction. It worked for that time in my life. I pursued graduate work even after I got my medical license to practice psychiatry. They paid for my tuition, why not? Hospital administration was the wave of the future, and I rode that wave here, to the woods of western British Columbia. I had a wife for a brief time back in Vancouver, but we parted ways before I was offered this position. In fact, I would have never applied for such a job if I'd been happily married. We have a car here at the Institute, and I used to drive it to the nearest city, an 80-mile round trip, back when my sex drive was more pronounced. There was an establishment on the edge of town, a sort of bar with rooms upstairs and women who would accommodate men in my position. After a while, my trips grew less frequent, and then they stopped altogether. Oh, sure, I had the money and could afford it, but the desire had waned. Likewise, I found there was less and less I desired to buy in stores. We had a Fred Meyer store that sprawled over several acres, but I couldn't find anything I wanted to buy. When I first realized that I would probably have no clients and nothing to do, I thought about raiding the pharmacy for drugs I could either ingest for my own entertainment or sell. But since they pay me well and I have no expenses, I keep accumulating money through the direct deposits of my paycheck into my bank account. Eventually, I diversified some of my holdings by buying stocks, bonds, and precious metals. But even that activity failed to hold my interest. Most of the drugs we give psychiatric patients are no fun at all and run little risk of being used for recreation. As I methodically went through our inventory, I tried to imagine myself enjoying them and could not form a concrete image that would induce me to do so. If I tried to sell them, I'd risk arrest for no meaningful gain. So I abandoned this pursuit and instead decided to put my energies into exploring the woods that surrounded our institute. At night, I can hear wolves howl. Most of the time they're far away, but sometimes alarmingly close. Last night I howled with them, sticking my head out the window and looking up at a full moon. The woods are pine and appear jet black at night, a mass of howling darkness that flows in every direction. I have a shortwave radio in the attic. In this day of the internet, it seems horribly outdated, but it still works. I can pick up signals from Russia and Asia quite easily. On a cold night, sometimes the radio waves skip across the globe like stones on a pond. Even though I no longer have a license to transmit, I do, using my call letters from 50 years ago. There's something exciting about going against the grain and resurrecting an old technology. Sure, I could simply email someone far away or post on a forum, but what's exciting about that? Deciphering words through the crackle of static caused by 1,000 thunderstorms over the Pacific seems a noble pursuit. It was doing this that I first came into contact with Olga. A medical doctor who no longer practiced, she lived alone in Siberia near Lake Baikal. Her English was quite good. After we talked for a few days, she confessed she didn't have an amateur radio license either. As crimes go, this seemed a small one. Because we were simply talking and there would be no trace of our conversation unless someone were making an audio recording, I opened up about my absurd situation here at the Institute. Being used to Soviet and now Russian bureaucracy, she wasn't surprised. It turns out that, unlike many of her friends and neighbors, she was not impoverished. Her late husband had done well in the oil and gas business. Like me, she was somewhat embarrassed by her riches. She didn't think about him much. It's only when you have no money that it becomes the central fact in your life. We talked every evening for over a month when she proposed that she come for a visit. She could fly into Vancouver and I'd pick her up at the airport. I had no idea what she looked like, nor did it matter. I told her my age, and so I imagined she had some idea of the old man she'd be visiting. Sex didn't promise to be an important part of the equation. She arrived the next week. I was pleasantly surprised to meet a trim woman in her 50s who seemed as relaxed and witty as she had over the radio. I guess I'd been fooling myself about the sex part because
when the rest of the world goes under, I'm not sure what's going to happen to Thailand.
Once she arrived, we jumped straight into the sack and didn't come up for air for almost a week.
Actually, I think it's going to do
Turns out she had a
okay,
3-month
although their
tourist
currency
visa.
will be
Easily extend
weak
that
enough
by
to
a
be
trip
strongly
the Russian
affected
consulate.
by the insolvency of other
So
countries.
we were set.
And so
We
there
were
will be a
couple.
crash.
Everything had changed.
Whatever bubble there
We
is
still
in
had
real
nothing to
estate
do.
prices will pop.
As anyone who's been
Poor will
single
get
for a
poorer.
long time and then is suddenly
The
a couple,
rich will
being with someone
suffer,
else
but
doesn't necessarily
either emigrate or
solve anything.
stay
And that's
put.
when Olga came up with
But
the
I think my lot will be okay. I think this is a pretty
we
good
would
place
start
for
a
someone
group,
in my
a
position.
cult, a religious society based on high ideals. You will be our head.
At
You will
some
not.
point in your life, you got to figure
will
this
do
might
all
be it. This
we'll
might be
invite
the
people
home
from
stretch.
all over the world to come here and live
This
together,
might be the final
working
inning.
towards some
I mean, that
lofty
final
goal.
inning might last a long
But what
time.
goal?
There might be
I have not
overtime.
gotten that far yet.
There might be a
But
playoff.
from what
or
I know of
whatever they
human
call
nature, if you offer people a way out,
Maybe not, maybe
some
so.
will choose to take it. We can start with Russians.
The only thing
and
I'm
then we
sure
can
of
expand.
is that if you don't like where you're at, the only person that's
Well,
going
it
to be
turned
able
out
to
to
do
be
anything
just
about
that
it is
simple.
you.
Within a
trying to
month of
wait
her
for other
posting an
people to take
invitation on
action is
several
folly.
social media sites, we had 12
And it's
Russians
a
who made
coward's
the
way
journey.
out anyway.
Within another
So,
month, we had a Brazilian couple.
Not making a decision
man
is
from
making a
Vietnam,
decision.
a woman from Malaysia.
If you don't like where
family
you're
of
at or
4
who you're
from
with or
South
what
Africa.
you're doing, only you can
We
change it.
capped enrollment at 20 to see how it would
I
work
figured
out.
that out.
She named the group Revolution
The thing
from
you gotta-
Within. Seemed a clumsy title to me, but since my
thing you
role was
gotta
to be a
remember
silent
is
presence, I said
there
nothing.
is no
During our meetings,
moment
I'd wear
better
a long
than
white
the
wig.
present moment
I looked like Johnny Winter.
to enjoy.
She'd talk about
First
whatever
of all,
interested
no moment
her.
exists, but
We'd sing simple
this
songs,
hypothetical
dance,
other
whatever.
moment that would be better
She
than
was
this
very
moment
interested in getting
and
input
deserve
from
your
our members.
enjoyment is a fiction.
Our
It doesn't
activities
exist.
involved working
It
online,
doesn't even make sense.
Fiverr, that sort of thing.
It's
Our
an
members
excuse
wrote
to
articles,
delay
did
appreciating
artwork,
now,
recorded voiceovers,
which is
anything
a
that someone
form of
needed to be
perverse
done
insanity.
and was willing to pay for.
Cards.
At first, the money wasn't much, but then with higher approval ratings,
1,
they
2,
could raise
3,
their
acting.
rates, and they did. Our first members were
Here
a bit
we are in our
lopsided
city
gender-wise, as we had too many
Chiang Mai has a
females,
really
so we
tiny city
recruited a
park.
few more males of varying ages.
Oh, maybe an
We
eight
advanced cautiously.
to a
After 6 months, we'd lost a few members, but
and
gained an
about
equal number.
100,000 people
Our
come
crowd
here
was a
every
bit
day.
long in the tooth.
So
Young
imagine
people
that.
didn't find us sexy enough and
It's beautiful
took their communal
landscape,
instincts elsewhere.
and
One of our older men
like a
was
lot of
obviously
Thai
mentally
things,
ill,
they
but
seem
so
to
long
be
as he
very
didn't bother
inefficient to
anyone, we let him
Westernized, but
stay.
They do a great job.
He was aware of his condition and had been asked to leave other communities,
Why-
so
They
he kept
employ
a low
lots of
profile.
people to do anything because
Two middle-aged Danish
jobs,
women were
jobs,
obviously in a
big
lesbian
population.
partnership, and all went well until one started to transfer her
Ah.
affections to another woman. The abandoned party did not take that well.
so if
She
I can't
threatened
enjoy
violence
this,
and then
what
threatened us
can I
all with
enjoy?
going to the police and complaining
If I
that we were a
can't
sick
enjoy
sex cult. We let her
Where I
make a
am, who
complaint,
I'm with, and what
but
I'm
the police
doing.
never came. So she left
What
in the
kind
house.
of change would then make enjoyment
We
possible?
never grew above 30 members.
Well,
Our
the
weekly
normal
meetings
thing
became
to
too
assume would
tedious
be
and
if I only
complicated when the
changed
group
who
got
I was
too
with,
large.
my location, and my activities,
I busied
then I
myself
would be
studying the
fine
history of the
being
asylum, of which I was
happy.
the
Of
chief
course, even I
operating
know
officer.
that's not true.
It turns out the man I replaced
know
had been
that
quite a
would be silly
colorful character,
believe.
especially by Canadian standards.